Welcome to Hope Natural Health, the podcast inspiring you to be your best version. Join me, your host, Dr. Erin, naturopathic doctor, dog mom, cancer survivor, and girl boss weekly as we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Welcome back to the Hope Natural Health podcast, where I try to get you healthy the right way. Last week, we talked about period productivity. So don't miss this episode. Go back and take a listen if you missed it. But this week, I'm super excited to have Dr. Laura here, one of my friends and colleague, who we are going to be talking about your brain and stress. Dr. Laura is a functional medicine doctor turned health and performance coach for busy, driven women. She helps female entrepreneurs align their brain and body for optimal health so they can maintain their high performance lifestyle without burning out. Welcome to the show, Dr. Laura.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh gosh, you guys are in for a treat. She is a plethora of information, and we actually met at the Powerhouse Women Mastermind, and I think I've mentioned Powerhouse Women a few times on the podcast, but if you don't know what that is, look it up. You won't be disappointed, especially if you're a female entrepreneur or looking to start your side hustle or any of that. It is a wonderful, wonderful group of women, and that's where Dr. Laura and I met, and I'm so fortunate to have met her. So we're going to jam on brain and stress, but first, let's talk a little bit about how you got into your current work.
Yeah, so I found functional medicine and what I do currently in kind of a non-traditional way. I actually thought I wanted to go into biomedical research when I was in college. Got a job in a research lab and found it just kind of lonely. I was in the lab by myself, like really late all the time. Decided I need a little bit more human connection in my daily life. So I figured some sort of medical school was the next option. I had started to get like really into nutrition and working out and weight training at the time. And I remember going to some medical school interviews and asking about nutrition and kind of like getting laughed at. Like, oh, we don't really need the nutrition part. And I'm like, well, it's probably not for me. So my senior year of college, I met a chiropractor. That was the first time I ever went to one. And it turns out she was also a functional medicine provider. So I went in for this session for back pain and came out with all this information about my gut and my stress levels and my sleep that was all messed up. And I was just like totally hooked. Went to chiropractic school, got my master's in nutrition, immediately went into functional medicine training. I spent most of the last 8 or 9 years working with a lot of chronic illness, autoimmune, Hashimoto's clients. I myself had Hashimoto's diagnosis when I was younger, so that's a passion point of mine. But really in the last 2 years, I was introduced for the first time to this world of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial women. Mm-hmm. And when you find your tribe, you find your tribe. And I just love supporting these women so that they can keep bringing their gifts to the world without the burnout, without the chronic health issues, without having to choose between business success and optimal health. Because I know you're with me on this. You can absolutely have both of those things.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, so important. And I love what you're doing now. I think it's so fascinating, and there's definitely a need for it because, I mean, I'm probably guilty of it too. I've gotten burnt out here and there, and we don't have to. And we can still lead the lifestyle we want and not, have burnout. So I am so appreciative of what you do. But that leads us into our conversation today and how having this entrepreneurial lifestyle is very, very stressful. But let's dive in to say, how does this really affect our brain?
Yeah, it can be stressful. And I have this theory that most entrepreneurial women, they're so curious by nature, they're going to experience burnout once. Mm-hmm. So let's just look at it like a fun little self-experiment and then never go back there again. Learn our lessons from it and move on. But yeah, the nature of kind of that higher stress lifestyle, meaning more demands, you're setting your own schedule. As you grow, you're responsible for other people, whether it's, employees or contractors, your clients. it's something that a lot of people go into for more freedom and flexibility, but it comes with a much different set of stressors. And yes, we know stress can make us just tired. We know it can affect our hormones, as I'm sure your patients are so used to hearing. But really, it also can start this kind of vicious cycle in our brain if we're not careful and if we're not managing it correctly, to the point that, especially that chronic stress day in and day out, that's the one that we're really talking about here. Our body's pretty resilient. We're, an acute stressor, a moment in time, we can handle that pretty well. But it's that poorly managed stress over time that really can create an inflamed brain and really impact the function of your brain on a daily basis. So a lot of women end up in this place where they have brain fog, they have anxiety, they're not sleeping, they can't remember things as well, and they can't figure out where it's coming from. And really, we have to step back and look at how this complex hormone cascade of how stress is really impacting our brain and its ability to perform.
Gosh. Yeah. And I think all of us probably just raise your hand like, oh, I have brain fog. I have some anxiety. Yeah, maybe my sleep is a little bit off. I think all of us have a little bit of that, but it's just, like you said, like chronic, like how long can we really sustain that? I mean, there's probably not really an answer, but everyone's different.
Right. And I think it's like anything else. It's like, imagine you start a workout plan, right? And you're working out every day.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, you can pretty much handle that stress day after day, and it's exciting and it's new. And yeah, your body hurts, but then you start moving again and you forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you continue that day in and day out for like 2 years, inevitably there's like some injuries, some muscle strains, some movement imbalances. That same thing is happening to your brain when you're not handling stress and when you're not supporting your brain the way it is. And I think a big concept for women to wrap their head around is like, you may think you're resting when you're not working, but if your idea of rest is still listening to podcasts, reading, scrolling social media, watching TV, your brain doesn't get to rest. Even though you feel like you're resting, your brain is still processing all that information. And sometimes it really just needs like a break, even if it's just for 10 or 20 minutes.
And
so
that would
understanding.
What would be a good example of a break? Like walking, not doing anything with your brain? I mean, I guess we think when we walk.
I know this is changing because I'm this person too.
I'm like, wait, you're talking to me, Laura. Stop.
Like maybe 2 or 3 times a week, do your walk without the podcast, without the music, or like 20, 30 minutes before bed, instead of scrolling social media or having a TV show on, like, can you let your brain just unwind in silence, or like some really low-key classical instrumental music? Not making it work so hard and then expecting it to just, shut off when you're ready to go to sleep.
Yeah, so important. And you said that, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is so me. Because that's how I feel like I unwind is, social media, or I drive and I listen to a podcast, because driving it's interesting because I see patients all day, and for me, those things are the way that I unwind and get my brain off of like patient care and like thinking about patients. But in reality, I'm still working because it's still feeding my brain information. But
for sure, and like the brain's pretty powerful, like it can handle that. But once in a while, like really just giving it a break. I think that's why sometimes people do so well when they try things like float tanks. Like you're really forced to just remove all that sensory input and give your brain and your nervous system a little time to unwind.
Oh yeah, you can't do anything in there.
Exactly. You're forced.
Nope, can't do anything in there. So that kind of leads into the next question with the brain as a powerful, machine. So and it's driven by these neurotransmitters that we have. So can you touch on our neurotransmitters that really drive us and our brain function?
Yeah. And like, I love talking about this because I think it's fascinating that things like our drive, our ambition, our feelings of happiness and content, there's like little chemicals floating around in our brain and body that contribute to that. So how cool is that? Like your body is the the OG AI technology for happiness if you know how to use it.
Yep.
But there's a couple to think about. And I think women have at least heard some of these things like serotonin, things like dopamine, things like oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
But really, if you understand what these do, you can use them to work with you versus, missing their effects because you're not paying attention to your brain health.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if you're listening to this and you are like, I am a busy, driven, goal-achieving, goal-oriented woman, like dopamine is a good one to start with. It's like the basis of our happiness and reward pathway. And that feeling of excitement, like when you're creating something new, when you're on your way to, achieve something big, to get a big payday, that feeling of excitement, that is your dopamine flooding your brain. Entrepreneurs are very dopamine driven. We can use it to our advantage without a doubt. But sometimes we can miswire the dopamine pathway to respond to things like Instagram likes or our email dings. And then all of a sudden, the only time we get that happy rush of feeling fulfilled is if we get social media status, social media likes, things like that. So we end up misassigning this pathway to things that in the grand scheme of things are not super meaningful, when we could be assigning them to much more like quality of life, meaningful things, like attaching them to things that truly make us happy, real rewards, not a phone ping. And as you, I'm sure, talk to your audience about, we also have to think with things like dopamine, it's also related to our female hormones. So estrogen and dopamine go hand in hand. Like we are much more likely to get a good dopamine hit when we have good estrogen levels. So, maybe it's the first half of your cycle, but another reason why we want women's hormones to be so balanced and optimal, it goes far beyond your period. I mean, it really impacts your brain health. If you're totally tanked on your estrogen levels, it's really hard to get that feeling of accomplishment and achievement. And that can be really frustrating for a lot of driven women.
Oh yeah, for sure. Do you have any tips on, I guess, boosting our dopamine?
Yeah. So my first and foremost is like really sitting down and thinking about like, what are your goals, whether it's with your business, whether it's your personal goals, whether it's with your family? Like, are you creating a lifestyle and a business that works towards things that you find very meaningful? Every little thing that you do, if you're working towards a tangible thing that makes you happy, maybe that's more time with your family. Maybe that's a business that allows you to travel, to experience the world. All of those things are going to create much more dopamine to get you the ambition and the drive to work towards that a little bit more. And also at the same time, taking out those false rewards, like stop allowing a phone message to determine how your day is going to go. Stop getting derailed if someone unfollows you on social media. You literally have to retrain your brain, as silly as that sounds.
Oh, it's true. Yeah,
100%.
What's another good, or well, you said serotonin, oxytocin. I'll let you pick a little bit about.
We'll do oxytocin next, and then we can save serotonin for the end. Oxytocin, I love. It is love. Most women are familiar with oxytocin as like the love hormone that you make when you look at your baby and when you're breastfeeding and when you're getting hugged. But even if you're not a mom, you can still harness the power of oxytocin release.
With our dogs, right?
Yes, with your pets, loving on your pets, spending time intentionally with people you love, family, friends, being part of a community, even massage and actual human touch. So this is my theory. One of the reasons that people have been so sad the last couple of years is like we forgot human connection, and we really need that for oxytocin. It's that feeling of belonging, that feeling of community. Like who doesn't like a massage or petting a dog? Like very simple ways to just give your brain a good, happy boost of euphoria.
Right. Yeah. So true.
And again, it's something that's connected intimately to our estrogen levels.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have healthy estrogen levels, we have much better and more efficient oxytocin binding. So when your hormones get all out of whack, sometimes you can kind of lose that ability to get that feeling of love and community and belonging. And I think that's really important for mental health.
Oh, so true. And if you're a patient of mine, I run prolactin all the time, and prolactin is another one of these hormones that has a direct effect on our neurotransmitters. So that goes hand in hand. So it's not just brain chemicals; they are it has a relationship, just like Dr. Laura said, with the hormones. So super important. The body is connected, and I say that probably every day. It's so connected, and that's where naturopathic medicine and functional medicine shines, is because we look at everything. So important. But yeah, oxytocin is one of my faves, and I'm not a child mom, but I'm a dog mom, and I get my oxytocin every day from Diesel Dog and Heidi, and it's the best. So if anything today, go hug your dog or go hug your child and get your hit of oxytocin after you listen to this podcast.
Absolutely. I think pet owners everywhere understand that feeling of just like you're having a day and then your dog comes over with the smile and the wagging tail.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, everything is just so much better.
Oh, for sure. And they never judge. They're just
Right.
they're just full of oxytocin. Yep. Yeah. So let's talk serotonin.
Yes, serotonin is the brain chemical everybody wants and that most busy, rushing women do not have. Serotonin is really like what makes you feel happy and content. It's like the reason it feels so good when you're outside, breathing in fresh air, standing in the sunshine. That's like a good old serotonin hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way we're supposed to feel as humans. And a lot of the things that we tend to do as busy women can deplete our serotonin. Things like working inside of the computer for long hours without getting that fresh air and sunshine, consuming negative news, negative social media, inflammation from poor nutrition and chronic stress. And the big one is putting yourself on the back burner to care for everybody else. Doing those are all going to deplete the heck out of your serotonin. And, breaking this cycle of rushing around, of stressing, of worrying about everyone else is really what you have to do to get back that feeling of natural happiness that you can have.
Yep. Yep.
So
go ahead.
When women are constantly, rushing around and being busy and feeling stressed, like your brain is very primal. It tries to find something that will make you feel better. It's like, okay, we're rushing, we're worrying. We need a serotonin hit. What's it going to be? But it doesn't always know what that is. So we can start finding things like, is it a cupcake? Is it a glass of wine? Is it, I don't know, a new scrolling social media?
Right.
Like just this feeling where everything's okay, your serotonin drops out, and then it's not okay. Like nothing changed, but now you need something and you want something, have absolutely no idea what it is. And that's a very frustrating feeling. And really what it is your brain crying out like, hey, okay, we need a serotonin flood. And I really can't do that when you're rushing around and stressing out about everything. And I can't focus on what you need.
Yeah. So important. So everyone out there, you women, even men too, you have 3 assignments. One, you've got to find your oxytocin hit for the day, whether that's an animal or a loved one. Then we've got to go outside or find something that's going to reward us. That's, healthy, not the wine, not the cupcake. For me, it's the sun. I just had a conversation with a patient yesterday and I said, go outside and see the sun. Like now that I work in a building where I don't have a window in my office, I literally forced myself to go outside, and it's literally the best high you can get. And you don't even have to be out there very long. Just a quick 5-minute walk around the block or the building, or just sit outside for 5 minutes. Like that's really the serotonin push you can get. And then dopamine. Find something that's going to, I guess, pleasure you, but not sabotage you.
And like within the lens of all those, like it also just comes down to like, basic human needs. Like, are you eating good, nutritious food? Are you moving your
Mhm.
body? Are you talking to other humans? Like,
Mhm.
basic things will help balance all that
Right.
out. And with dopamine, gift and a curse, just make sure you're directing it towards things that bring you happiness, that bring you joy, and that move you forward in life.
Yep. Yep. I love the neurotransmitters. They're so important. And I believe there is some testing that I don't really run too often in practice, but there is testing that we can see for, proper neurotransmitter production. But, usually basic lab work can see if we've got, the good precursors for these neurotransmitters like B vitamins, magnesium, a lot of things that I talk about a lot, plus our hormones too, like we mentioned. So real quickly, can you talk a little bit about how cortisol is kind of intertwined into all of this? Because that's our stress hormone that I literally probably talk about on every podcast, but it definitely can be intermixed in our conversation. So if you can touch on that.
Right. So if your brain chemicals are like all the little ants outside on the sidewalk, too much cortisol is like the kid with the magnifying glass. Like,
Mm.
it can impact everything if it's not in check.
Mm-hmm.
So cortisol gets a bad rep. Like, yes, it can be good for some things, but most women I talk to either have way too much cortisol all the time, or they've gotten to the point where their system is so tired of trying to handle stress that it's just like given up, and they have really low cortisol. Cortisol impacts everything from how well we can sleep, our mood, how our sex hormones are regulated. It can literally shrink your brain tissue if we're making too much of it for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to find like that sweet spot. Like, you don't want zero cortisol. You also don't want a ton of it. You want just the right amount.
Right. Yeah, and that goes back to the beginning about how we need to give our brain a little rest. You're giving your whole body a rest when you give the brain a rest. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to start doing that because I'm trying to think of really what I do that gives my brain a rest.
You're like, oh no, I can't think of anything.
Does exercise count? I feel like I don't really you're not really like thinking a whole lot when you exercise. That might be
Yeah.
a
So
little brain
e-
rest.
exercise definitely can help. The things to watch out for, like if you're super high stressed, then maybe doing crazy intense exercise 7 days a week
Right.
isn't going to be the best fit for you. So if you know you're in a stressful season, like short, intense workouts, a lot of walking, some weight training, like you can kind of cue your movement patterns into what your lifestyle is like when it comes to exercise.
Yep.
And there's
Listen.
also there's active ways to manage your cortisol. Like, you don't have to just sit and be a lump on the couch, but this is where things like breath work and grounding and, things like sauna use and infrared PEMF mats come into play. Like, if you're like someone who is like, I am not going to slow down, that's okay. But what if you can take actions to help regulate your
Mm-hmm.
cortisol, regulate your nervous system? Breath work is like my current favorite for that. But there's a lot of different things that women can try out.
Oh yeah, plenty of things, and I think I've touched on some of those in various podcasts. So yeah, there's lots of different things. Oh my gosh, what did we miss? I feel like we got most of the good brain stuff. So we'll kind of wrap the podcast up by asking the question that I ask all my guests. Give me your best or favorite health tip.
Ooh, just one.
I know.
What a hard choice.
It's tough.
My favorite is actually, it's a little esoteric, but like most people I talk to who are high performers, high achievers, they always want the next strategy. Like, what supplement plan do I take? What do I do for this? I challenge you to take a step back, and instead of just looking for the next plan, the next strategy, I want you to really tap into like what your body wants. Most of us have become completely disconnected from our body.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to going to doctors and being treated like a set of labs, like not a full person. But I promise, like, everything you need for healing is already within you. Like, you're a whole and complete person. You just need to get in touch with it. So like, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, instead of immediately reaching for like an anti-stress supplement or an anti-anxiety supplement, those can be helpful. But really sit for a minute and say, why am I feeling this way? What is this trying to teach me? What is this challenging me to rise up and meet and grow from?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds a little woo-woo, but I promise if you start to do that, you're going to start cueing into your body signals. And like reconnecting that brain and body is such a necessary part of really achieving health, no matter if we're talking about gut health, brain health, stress support, hormones. So find that reconnection to yourself and to your body.
That's so important. And I think that's really, really difficult for, the audience that we're trying to speak to with these high performing individuals, myself included. It's like, yeah, we always try and find the next thing, but then we don't really say, what do I really want? What does my body want? Does it want to break? Does it want to rest? Does it want to sleep? Yeah, super, super important. Oh my gosh, you have been so amazing. You have this like cool little brain training mini course, don't you? Tell me about that.
I do. I just like really wanted to break some of this information down into little bite-sized pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a Train Your Brain mini course that basically goes through why we need to care about our brain. It goes through serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, your endorphins, and how to optimize each of these through diet, through lifestyle, through your work schedule, all within the lens of women's health and syncing it up with your hormones. So it's been a fun little course. Good feedback on it.
Oh, good. I need to check this out. But you listeners get a special code. It'll be in the show notes. But if you use Dr. Erin, you're going to get $10 off. Thanks, Dr. Laura.
Of course.
And all of that will be linked in the notes, the link to that, and then the code. So check out the brain course. I definitely will be on that because I think the brain is fascinating. I remember it was my favorite part of the cadaver when we were in school was learning the brain. It is incredible. The brain is just fascinating. So I love it. And I love you more. And I'm so happy that you were on the pod with me today. And all of Dr. Laura's information will be on the show notes. But if there's any last words, here's your chance.
No, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about all of this stuff with another health enthusiast.
Awesome, Dr. Laura. Well, thank you again. And we will see you all next week.
Bye.